Mutant Chronicles is a 2008 sci-fi action-adventure written by Philip Eisner, directed by Simon Hunter, and starring a surprisingly strong cast: Thomas Jane, Ron Perlman, John Malkovich, Sean Pertwee, and Devin Aoki. Wow. Way back in the long ago, a strange machine crashed to Earth from outer space, unleashed a horde of evil mutants, and nearly wiped out humanity. The humans fought back and managed to seal the machine and its mutant army away, but I guess over time everyone just kinda forgot where they buried the thing. Anyway, a few centuries later, two corporations, Capital and Bauhaus, are having a good old-fashioned Donnybrook. See, in Mutant Chronicles, corporations have taken the place of government, so instead of nations going to war for land and natural resources, corporations now go to war for land and natural resources. It's way different. They're going at it good and hard when they accidentally blow open the giant seal that had been containing the ancient machine, causing it to wake up and start cranking out its world-ending mutant army once more. The corporate leaders start evacuating Earth, while Brother Samuel, a monk from the Brotherhood Church, asks the, board of directors, I guess, to allow him to assemble a ragtag band of soldiers composed of the most elite fighters from each of the different corporations in order to carry out a dangerous mission to deliver a device to the heart of the machine that could possibly destroy it once and for all. Tale as old as time. Now, before I get to the movie itself, I want to talk a bit about the game that the movie is based on. Mutant Chronicles is, or was, or is, a pen and paper RPG that was first published back in 1993 by Target Games. It also serves as the setting for a tabletop wargame called Warzone and a board game called Siege of the Citadel. Back in the day before Warhammer 40,000 was the undisputed immortal turbo king of all things tabletop, it was just the regular mortal king, and there were several other miniatures games that could actually compete with it and have products actually stocked and sell in stores that also carried Games Workshop stuff. And Mutant Chronicles was one of those games. Now, I guess I didn't know just how big Warhammer already was even way back then, because it seemed to me, at least at the time, like Mutant Chronicles was a good, serious contender that could go toe-to-toe with 40K. It has the same over-the-top, badass to the extreme design aesthetic, a pretty grim-dark setting with religious trappings, and the two seem to be locked in whatever the equivalent of an arms race is for pauldron size. Also, even though Target Games was Swedish, Mutant Chronicles, like 40K, has a very British 2000 AD type vibe. And since we lived in a small town with no gaming scene, my brothers and I weren't brand loyal. All war games were just war games, including 40K, and we just bought whatever minis we thought were the coolest. Sometimes that was Space Marines for Warhammer, and sometimes it was Imperial Trenchers or Bauhaus Blitzers for Mutant Chronicles. So, why on earth did I tell you all of that? Well, for one, I like to talk about things I like. And two, as an old fan of Mutant Chronicles, I don't know who this movie was made for. If I were to watch this movie without knowing the title, it might never cross my mind that it's actually based on Mutant Chronicles. I mean, sure, there are little clues and Easter eggs here and there, such as character names and, obviously, the corporations, but beyond that, it has practically nothing to do with the lore or setting of the game. For starters, in almost no visual way does this movie resemble its source. The game has this vibrant, over-the-top, pseudo-cyberpunk 90s to the max aesthetic that is super badass, while the movie has a very dreary, washed-out World War I diesel punk look. The main reason you adapt a pre-existing property into a movie, besides it being a good story that you want to bring to the masses, is because it has a built-in fan base, and those are, potentially anyway, guaranteed ticket sales. Plus, there might also be the knock-on effect of getting new people interested in the source. Movies or video games based on existing IPs have a tendency to drive people who were either unaware of or uninterested in the source to check out what they'd been missing. The Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter movies definitely sparked new interest in the books, and the recent Space Marine 2 video game surely sold a few 40K miniatures. But those stuck to their sources, and so fans of the sources were also pleased with the outcomes. Mutant Chronicles, on the other hand, kinda screws it up on both ends because fans won't recognize the movie, and anyone checking out the game after the movie will be thoroughly confused by the wild, vibrant visuals and character designs. I mean, the movie flopped anyway, so at the very least, sticking to the source couldn't have hurt it. Given that it had a $25 million budget, which is honestly more than I would have guessed, and everything is being shot on green screen and it's gonna look low budget anyway, why bother going for a completely different aesthetic? Why not make it look low budget and retardedly over the top and badass the way Mutant Chronicles is supposed to? And it's not the low budget look of the movie that bugs me. I'm the eternal champion of the little guy with shallow pockets and a dream. It's just why completely change the look and the lore when all that's gonna do is irk the small handful of people in the world who even know what Mutant Chronicles is. Which brings me to another point. It's not like they used the Mutant Chronicles name because it's a heavyweight brand with broad recognition that would get producers to write blank checks. I'm honestly a little shocked that they got a $25 million budget. In the grand scheme of things, very few people know about Mutant Chronicles. The game itself has died and been brought back several times due to it, unfortunately, not being super popular. And unlike Warhammer 40,000, it's virtually unknown outside of the tabletop gaming hobby. They could have called their movie anything, and the results likely would have been the same. Maybe better, given that fans like me wouldn't be whining about the changes. There is a lot of really cool lore that they just ignored in order to tell their own original story, and if you're gonna do that, fine, but then just make something original. Don't tack an existing brand onto it if you're not going to exploit it. But after all that belly aching, you know what? I don't hate this movie. I actually like it. My biggest gripe about it is that it's supposedly based on an IP I love without utilizing that IP to the fullest. But the movie taken on its own is actually pretty neat. I mean, it's not mind-blowing or anything, but it's pretty damn decent. For starters, the setting is really unique. It's hundreds of years in the future, but as I mentioned earlier, everything has a sort of World War I aesthetic. The soldiers look like British and German infantry circa 1917, trench warfare is still a thing, and the firearms still shoot bullets and have wooden stocks. There's interplanetary travel, but the vehicles are powered by steam and maybe fossil fuels. It's a weird anachronistic mashup that's pretty damn nifty and would make a cool setting for an RPG or war game on its own. Also, the cast, like I said, is surprisingly strong with well-known veteran actors who aren't just phoning it in because they're in a low-budget movie with a silly premise. They're all taking it seriously, which helps to sell it. They're not always helped by the material though. The dialogue can get pretty clunky at times, but they still deliver those clumsy lines with gusto, and my hat's off to them for it. The visuals are where I think a lot of people will check out. There's no denying that this movie looks low budget, and I can see people being turned off by the very noticeable green screen that permeates about 90% of the movie. The blood effects are particularly bad and stick out like a sore thumb. There's also the fact that this is a very dreary movie. There are very few moments of levity, and the visuals are likewise washed out, giving the whole thing a joyless, oppressive feel, which I guess is kind of appropriate for a movie about a nigh-hopeless suicide mission. But if you can get past all that, there are some cool shots, props, and miniatures to look at. I particularly like the flying machines. They're a mix of steam locomotive and submarine, which is a description that makes a lot more sense when you see them in action. The bad guys are a bit of a letdown though. Without griping too much about how they don't resemble the Dark Legion from the game, they're basically just zombies. They all have this one big claw in place of their right hands, which makes them all look identical and visually unappealing. There should have been a little bit of variety in their design and a big bad or two to break things up and make the action scenes more interesting, rather than the heroes just fighting off waves of carbon copy cannon fodder. But all in all, Mutant Chronicles is this weird little movie that, while unfaithful to its source and uneven in its execution, isn't totally unappealing. I mean, it's definitely not for everyone, but if you have a couple hours to kill and you want something pretty unique, and you have a powerful suspension of disbelief, you might enjoy it. Also, kind of a weird little aside, but if you're an Imperial Guard fan, especially Death Korps of Krieg, you might get a kick out of the first big battle scene. As of this recording, it's available to rent on Amazon and Apple TV, and it's free on Hoopla and Plex, whatever those are. Also, I'm gonna leave some links to some Mutant Chronicles sources in the description. There's some PDFs of the old rule books to download and check out, and trust me, they're worth it. There's also a channel here on YouTube that did an awesome job compiling the lore of the universe. It really is a cool setting that I think deserves a lot more love and attention. Anyway, that's gonna do it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Adios. Potentially, coffee, everybody. Whoa, shit.